Hi, Karsten. Yeah, let's wait until 3 past or so before starting, as usual. Okay, it's... hi, Christian. So it's 3 past, I think we can start. Welcome everyone to this interim meeting of CORE. This is Marco, my co-chairs are Jaime Jimenez and Karsten Bormann. And as usual, the not well applies. Please be familiar with that. It's not just about IPR, it's also and especially about our code of conduct, so be nice with each other. The agenda for today is most about 2 points. Some proposals to discuss, some possible additions to the href documents that I discussed with some other guys a couple of weeks ago. And then a topic related to core and anima that will also continue during the IoT-Ops interim meeting following core. In fact, we plan to close this meeting latest at 15 UTC and to switch to IoT-Ops, where, again, especially this second topic from the agenda will be discussed. But we can do some early discussion and preparation here already. I'll try to take notes, but any help is appreciated. Other than that, any more items for the agenda or any bashing? If no, okay, we can start with the first agenda item, and I prepared some slides for that. Okay, it's about the href document, still referring to the latest submission 11. I've just had some proposal to share related to the URI scheme. encoded in the CRI in particular. This is just a snapshot from the current draft from the CDDL definition of the CRI, where the URI scheme can be expressed for sure as a ciphertext string, but possibly also as a negative integer. And currently there is a list of well-known, most important schemes with their associated negative integer. So I started to think how we can ensure interoperability also in an extensible way the moment additional schemes may be considered if we want to use in a compact way these negative integers. Basically, since there is no registry for those integers at the moment. I think this already holds from a general point of view, but otherwise there have been a few cases in point about this. Yeah, and this is the main one that actually triggered this thinking. We have the Multicast notifications document for which there is a pull request about using CRIs on it, in fact. So this is an extract from the pull request. So what we've been proposing there, where essentially information specified by the server indicate as a CRI the addressing information of the server, and this parameter TPI-SRV, and then additional information to put all the clients on the same page, also expressed as a CRI. We also used to have an IANA registry around basically to give indication of what TPI details should say, depending on the particular scheme used in TPI-SRV, and that registry will also becomes easier the moment we switch to CRI. So here on the right, you can see how the registry would look like with its new structure. And if you check also the proposal and the PR, in fact, that's already thinking of negative integers as registered somewhere. But again, we don't have a registry at the moment. And related to this, well, a subset of TPI-SRV, basically, with all this in mind, again, would be used also in another document where a co-op option would indicate addressing information of the server, although limited only to the scheme and authority without local part. But still, the scheme is involved again. So putting all this together, it seemed like there were enough reasons to start thinking of introducing an actual registry to track those negative integers. I've had a discussion about this with Thomas Fossati and Henk a few days ago, but I wanted to bring it here too. The proposal is actually about 2 points. One is pretty easy. We just noticed that the list of well-known schemes already associated with the negative integer could actually be extended up front to include also the co-op plus schemes already existing. I don't know, that possibly warrants also some reordering of the actual negative integers value assigned, but that's a minor thing. So this would be the first point, and it should be relatively easy and uncontroversial. The second point is instead about the actual registry, as I mentioned before, and in turn it includes a number of sub-points to consider and to discuss. As a tentative structure, yeah, I was thinking of something like that. It should be relatively easy, just the scheme in question with the same name it takes from the main URI schemes registry, of course, the negative integer value that we want to associate with it, trying to be very conservative about the negative integers that are encoded in 1 or 2 bytes in CBOR, and those should really be protected and used in the interest of IoT use cases, while we can be more flexible for other ranges to be used for whatever use case. And then, of course, a reference to the document that is registering the scheme and or the negative integer, because, of course, those already defined in href would point to the href document, which defines only the integers and not any new scheme. But then this would continue with additional details on the registry, like the policy. Hopefully, specification required would be good enough. And then, of course, what should be initially registered and how to define policies for future registration. Well, it's easy to imagine that the negative integers already defined in the href document would be a part of the initial population of the registry. But other than that, and here is where I started to get additional input also from Karsten the other day, we may decide to go through the already existing URI schemes and select only a few of those that we believe are expected to be used in CRIs and pre-register the negative integers for those schemes too. But then after that, meaning following the href document, what to admit to be registered. And if I understood Carsten's suggestion correctly, yeah, it would be good to give only a single opportunity for a future new scheme to be, to continue with the registration of a negative integer for the CRI, meaning in that exact document where that new scheme is proposed and registered itself, and no more after that. So this is an overview of the proposal and its 2 points, and the rest is for discussion. Anyone? Karsten, go ahead.
Yeah, so the reason we originally didn't see this as an extensible list was that if you make this list extensible and apply the ability to encode negative integers to existing schemes during the lifetime of CRIs, then you run into the problem that anybody who's encoding such a URI as a CRI won't know whether the recipient actually knows about that registration. So from an interoperability point of view, you create a problem. And also, since senders will typically be aware of this problem, you essentially force them to continue to use the text form because that is by definition interoperable, even if there is an integer form, because you don't know whether your consumer, the consumer of the CRI, is going to know about the registration. And actually, the whole point about the UI is that you can formulate it without actually knowing who the recipient of that thing is. It's supposed to be universal. That's why it's called a URI. So that is a big problem. So if we really want to add the ability to register new integers for schemes, this only can be made interoperable by essentially registering the negative integer at the birth of the new URI scheme. And that is, of course, difficult to actually make sure gets done because people register new URI schemes all the time. And it really would be necessary to add the integer registration at the time the URI scheme itself is registered. And I'm not even sure that this works 100% because the URI scheme may be in use for a while before finally it is being registered, because it's much easier to avoid collisions by using text strings. So if I have a new foo scheme that I want to use, the draft for that may live for 2 or 3 years before the foo actually is being registered. This is the way things go, and you would have to essentially do an as early as possible early allocation to make sure that the negative integer is available with that for CRI usage. What we are really doing here is we are essentially adding a column in the URI scheme registry, but I'm not sure we can phrase it this way. So saying this is a separate registry may be easier to do, but we probably should be discussing this with the URI scheme people over at the URI scheme list as well.
And this is mostly about the final point in the slide, right?
Yes. So yeah, we don't need a registry if we don't want to allow for future registrations, because then it's just a task we have to do to make sure we have negative integers defined for all URI schemes where it makes sense. But if we want to allow future registration, then we have to think about this effect of having implementations that know about the URI scheme, but don't know about the negative integer for that.
Right. Thank you. Esko.
Yeah, hi. I had actually two questions. So one is just about the negative integers. So was there a reason not to use positive integers here? Maybe some background.
As far as I understood, they collide with other meanings that positive integers have in the syntax of CRIs. That's why they were chosen to be exactly negative.
Okay. Yeah, because it could also be a string, but yeah, that's a different type in principle. So okay.
Sure.
Okay, and yeah, the other question was for the yeah, the policy for future registrations that I think Karsten just explained well. Yeah, you could have the exact same problem if you register the scheme at the birth, let's say, because yeah, there could be a newer device that's sending a URI to someone who is a bit older, so the recipient, and still cannot convert a CRI to a URI in that case, because it's using a new created scheme basically. So you still have that same problem, but maybe it's not as bad in that case, because the recipient in any case doesn't know what to do with the scheme. But I think if it's about communicating URIs and being able to show the text form or to translate it to a text form, yeah, you still have that same problem, that any future schemes may not be recognized by devices.
Christian?
Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, maybe the question is, do we agree on that, or is there maybe another view?
On Christian here, on the topic of convertibility, that's to some extent a bit of a, you could call it a second-class citizen, in that sense that everything about CRIs is optimized for processing them as they are, and that comes at the cost of conversions being a bit harder, and in this particular case, maybe not being possible as well as they would as using it would be possible. So from that, I think that it would, if the question is, do we want extensibility at all or not, I think it would be a good compromise to have this kind of extensibility that might be problematic in the conversion part, but will at least be unambiguous for senders what they can use towards consumers.
Yeah, okay, I agree there.
Karsten?
There is also the question of comparing CRIs you cannot really compare them if you have negative integer for a scheme that you don't know whether it compares to a text. So right now, I think we don't have any statement about whether you are even supposed to be able to use the text form when there is a negative integer registered. So this is something we also may want to look into. So there is some canonicalness to that. So that's also maybe a problem we should be looking at.
But I don't think the comparing problem, the comparing problem is that hard, because if you want to determine identity of resources, you should know anyway whether those are normalized under the under the scheme-specific normalizations, which a general tool cannot know. So it will only be limited to syntactic normalization. And if it knows the protocol, or if it knows the scheme, it will also know the number. Yes, this does introduce a small syntax-based normalization issue that is usually not there. But I think the vast majority of identity comparisons would be by parties knowing also the normalization rules of the scheme. So what good is identity comparison if you can't be sure whether it works anyway?
Yeah, I think it's also not always clear whether the entity that does the conversion from URI to CI actually needs to be aware of the URI scheme that it is using right now. So the converting entity may not be the entity that actually acts on the URI scheme.
So is extensibility with this sort of approach worth exploring more with actual text to add? Karsten?
I didn't get the question.
Is it worth exploring this direction toward possibly adding text to the draft then?
Yes, very much so. So I think we should write up what kind of requirements and restrictions we would have on this policy for future registrations. And yeah, I'm pretty sure it can't be perfect with respect to avoiding the little problems that I enumerated. But on the other hand, not being able to extend it also is somewhat unsatisfactory, because it creates this second class system for newer URIs. I mean, it's not that expensive to we usually use scheme names that are kind of reasonable and not very long, but it's still a second class.
Okay, and this is on the second biggest part of this whole thing. Otherwise, the proposal one, trying to get back to the right slide, sorry. Yeah, this point instead should be, this should be less complicated and controversial. Do you think this is also fine to add?
Well, certainly the one on the slide, but we actually should do that task of looking at the scheme registrations and come up with likely URI schemes and put them in here.
Okay. So can we expect some new text already in this direction for the next submission, or there is more to discuss?
Well, I think I know enough to do text on proposal number 2. Proposal number 1 really requires this going through the hundreds of UI schemes that we have
Right.
out there, and yeah, it's easy for a single person to miss something. So I think we should maybe set up a little wiki where we collect these things before we actually do a PR.
Sounds good. Let's go.
Yeah, so I just had an idea. So there are some schemes that are likely very useful to be used here, and yeah, maybe other schemes that exist but are not probably not useful. But you could actually just take the entire list of schemes and then yeah, assign to everyone a number. So let's say not a 1 byte or 2 byte number, but maybe a bigger one, so that you also catch the rest of the schemes with a big number. And maybe it won't be used ever, but yeah, that's not really a problem because there are sufficient numbers available, so you could cover even all the schemes that are just registered. Whether that's useful, I don't know, but it could be done.
This would make converters very hard, but then again, those we don't care about much.
Sorry, what would be hard? Converters?
Yes, converting between URIs and CRIs, because they would then always have to lug around that list. But yeah, maybe that's reasonable.
Yeah, I don't think a converter in a typical kind of typical use case would have to have the whole list, only the ones to encounter. But if you want like a generic converter, indeed, it needs this database basically.
Those converters in constrained devices, I think, will be limited to the schemes that they do understand, and everything else is just opaque CRI, URI, whatever we don't convert because we can't use anyway.
Right. So I was thinking of if you have something like URI to CRI web page service or whatever, that could just carry the whole list. It's quite easy because it's not that much schemes that we have. So this is also one way to deal with that.
Thank you, Karsten, for having created already an entry point for this. Also in the minutes. Hey, great. Good discussion. Any more comment, input on this topic?
Yeah, just a question on the wiki. So what do the headers mean here? Likely 1 + 0, likely 1 + 1.
Karsten?
Yeah, looking for the unmute button again. So I just put 3 categories here. One for UI schemes that where we definitely want to use short identifier for, so that would be the 1 + 0 ones. So the numbers -1 to -24 have a short representation. Then the next ones would be the 24 to -24 to -256. Actually, -25 to -256. Which are still reasonably short, and then we have the 1 + 2s, which we have enough of. So we probably don't have to dive into the 1 + 4s. That was just for ordering the importance or likelihood of coming up with specific URI in a CI, URI scheme in a CI.
Okay, yeah, got it. So it's the kind of the category based on the length of the encoding. Yeah.
Yeah. So we can have 24 favorite children and another 232 not quite favorite children and many other children. And I updated the wiki page a little bit to make this more obvious.
Just one note on the side. The Bluetooth SIG has already done this exercise once, although not with limiting, not with a distinction between the low and the high numbers. But they do have a list of, I think, every scheme that was ever registered mapped to a 16-bit something number. So we may or may not want to start from there.
Yeah, that of course will be hard to enforce our registration requirements on, but if somebody has done the work, that is of course useful information. Can you dig up a pointer to that document?
Will do. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more points on this topic, anyone? Okay, thanks a lot. Then we can move on to the next item, which would be, well, prep work for the, I assume, wider discussion later into the IETF interim, and it would be about the resource type target attribute or possibly another target attribute for the ANIMA document.
Yeah, so we did this gymnastics to accommodate Michael, who I think is in a different meeting right now. So in order to be able to do this, we probably should pause now, finish this meeting and meet at the IoT Ops meet echo in half an hour again. So is this the way we want to proceed?
Yeah, I think unless we have some input or feedback now, because I also responded to the mailing list about the resource type registration for this joint proxy document. I'm not one of the authors there, but I did a review of that document. So I was just curious what the current status is and the thinking about using a resource type definition for that. I think I read from the mails there were some doubts about whether that's the right, basically the right way to do it.
Yeah, correct. The doubt is whether what we are registering there actually is a resource type. But let's have that discussion when Michael is actually able to follow, which will be in half an hour over in the IoT Ops meeting.
Sounds good. Then any other business for core? Heard none. See you soon in IoT Ops.
See you then.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Christian, for the minutes.